You know those moments when you really connect with someone? Maybe a friend tells a story, gives you goosebumps, or a speaker just holds the whole room.
Yeah.
What is it about that feeling that grabs you? Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, using the sources you sent us all about storytelling.
And it's quite a mix you've gathered. We've got marketing angles from Determ, really practical stuff from NPR Life Kits, some lively chat from Reddit,
Mm. Uh,
insights on emotion from the young writer, a historical look from a quintillion words, what makes stories compelling from anecdote, BeamG clarifying story versus narrative, and even faith perspectives from renew.org. It's a lot of ground to cover.
it really is. So our mission here is to pull out the most crucial bits from all of that, give you some real takeaways, maybe some surprising facts about what makes storytelling work, basically help you understand it better without getting lost in the weeds.
Sounds good.
Okay, so first things first, what is storytelling? I mean, beyond just telling someone what happened.
Yeah, that's a great starting point. And it's interesting, several sources make this distinction right away. It's
Yeah.
not just recounting events.
Right.
The young writer calls it an interactive art, using communication to spark the imagination.
Mm-hmm.
It's about adding flair, color, maybe some humor,
Mm-hmm.
creating an emotional connection. So it's really about the how, not just the what.
The how, making it land. And this isn't exactly a new idea, is it? People have been telling stories forever.
Oh, absolutely. A quintillion words points out it's as old as humanity.
Mhm.
It's true with oral traditions, long before writing. They mention Gilgamesh, one of the oldest stories we've actually deciphered.
Wow.
And the basic structure, a hero, challenges, a journey, it's still what we see in stories today. It taps
Mhm.
into something fundamental.
So it meets a basic human need. And it's not just for fun, right? Though obviously entertainment's a big part. There are deeper reasons.
Definitely. The sources hit on a whole range. Determ talks, marketing, grabbing attention, getting messages across memorably, educating customers,
Hmm.
NPR's Life Kit. That's more about personal connection, how stories build bridges between people. Renew.org talks about faith, how stories help us understand and connect with the spiritual.
Okay.
So across the board, it seems like stories help us connect, make sense of things, remember stuff, share what we've been through. It's fundamental.
Okay, that makes sense. So we know what it is, why it's fundamental. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What makes some stories just stick? The really compelling ones.
Anecdote has a really good breakdown of this. One key thing they mention is something unanticipated.
Surprise.
Exactly. Something unexpected happens. They use this example of a choir performance. The mic failed during a solo,
Oh.
but someone swapped it out super quick. And that little moment of drama, the recovery, made it way more memorable than if it had just gone perfectly smoothly.
Yeah, I can see that. It's the imperfections sometimes that make things stick. What else?
Relevance and relatability, that's huge. We connect when a story touches our own lives or, universal feelings.
Hmm.
There was that anecdote about relighting birthday candles.
Mm.
A simple mistake, but it became this funny shared memory. We've all
Uh-huh.
had those moments, right?
Mhm.
Where things go a bit wrong but end up being special.
Totally. Those are the stories you actually retell later, not the perfectly smooth ones.
Precisely. Then there's detail. Specifics matter. Names, places, bits of dialogue, they help you see it.
Right.
Anecdote contrast, like a high-level resume story, just the facts with one filled with actual moments.
Hmm.
The difference is huge. It's about painting that mental picture.
Absolutely. The more I can visualize, the more I'm in. And emotion must be massive, right?
Oh, central. Emotion makes stories compelling, makes them memorable. Think about stories about loss or overcoming huge challenges.
Yeah.
They tap into really deep feelings. Anecdote shared a story about a young man, Cameron, who battled cancer. It's just incredibly powerful because of the emotion involved.
Those really stay with you.
Definitely. And related to that is narrative proximity. Stories hit harder when they feel closer to home, even indirectly.
Like it could happen to me or someone I know.
Yeah, exactly that feeling. The example given was hearing about a client whose son was murdered. It resonates because of that shared human vulnerability.
I see.
And finally, anecdote mentions suspense. Holding back information just a bit, keeping the audience guessing, wanting to know what happens next.
Yeah.
That little hook.
Right. Keep them leaning in. Okay, so those are the ingredients. Now, how do we actually cook with them? How do we build our own stories effectively?
Well, NPR's Life Kit and some of the Reddit discussions had some great practical tips here. A big one is focus on meaningful moments.
Okay.
Think back to events that really shifted things for you. Why did that moment stick? What changed? What did you learn?
Start with the core, the why. Makes sense.
And then Try to boil it down.
Yeah.
Can you get the essence of your story into one sentence? It keeps you focused.
Good discipline.
Structure helps too. Remember Gilgamesh. Beginning, middle, end. It's a classic structure for a reason. And life could also mention thinking about the you at the start versus the you at the end. Show that transformation.
Oh, I like that. Showing growth or change through the story itself.
Exactly. Now, the Reddit folks were really big on keeping it short and sweet, usually.
Yes.
Cut the waffle. Get rid of unnecessary details, tangents. Someone apparently told a 20-minute story about a flat tire.
Oh, dear. We've all sat through one of those.
We have. And eliminate crutch words. You know, the ums, the likes, get rid of them. The young writer really pushes show, don't just tell.
Ah, the classic advice.
Yeah, but they had a neat analogy. Don't just say egg. Describe the world around the egg. So
Yeah.
don't just say I was sad. Describe the slumped shoulders, the quiet room.
Got it. Convey it through the details, the actions.
Precisely. And the young writer also says, vary emotions and descriptors. Don't just hammer one feeling. Use different senses. Describe things in fresh ways, though caution against, endless tragedy.
Right. Mix it up.
And a really key one from Reddit. Have a point. What's the takeaway? Why are you telling this story?
So it needs a purpose. It can't just ramble.
Exactly. And think about delivery. Reddit mentioned energy, enthusiasm, maybe even different voices for characters, though maybe be careful with accents.
Yeah, bad accents can sink a story fast.
They really can. Using relevant references, pop culture, things your audience knows can also build connection. And again, trim the fat, be concise. And finally, always consider your audience. Who are you talking to? What's the context? Tailor it.
That's a ton of great practical stuff. Now, something else that came up from BMG was this distinction between story and narrative. Can you unpack that a bit? It sounds important.
Yeah, it's a subtle but really key difference. BMG explains it like this. The story is the raw material. It's the sequence of events as they happen chronologically. A happens, then B, then C.
Okay, just the plot points.
Right. The narrative is how you tell it, the order you reveal those events in, the perspective you use, the emphasis you give. You can take the same story events, A, B, C, but tell them as C, then A, then B, and you get a completely different narrative experience.
Ah, so it's the telling, the structuring of the information.
Exactly. Narrative is what turns those events into, say, knowledge or understanding for the audience. By controlling that flow, you create suspense or mystery or highlight certain themes. Think about a whodunit versus a straightforward news report. Same basic events, totally different narrative.
So the narrative really shapes how we feel about the story, how we interpret it.
Totally. And BMG notes how choices about genre, is this a comedy or a tragedy, or especially point of view, radically change the narrative. They brought up the Rashomon effect.
Where everyone remembers the same event differently.
Precisely. Same core story, multiple conflicting narratives based on who's telling it. It shows just how much the telling matters.
That's fascinating. It really underscores how subjective it all is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at where this plays out. The sources gave examples from different areas, right? Determ had those marketing case studies.
They did, yeah. Some really interesting ones.
Like that Jana Water one or Nike using those familiar lyrics but twisting them.
Right. And what's effective there is how brands use narrative to connect emotionally, not just list features. Think about McDonald's UK's The List ad. It wasn't really about burgers, was it? It was about family time over possessions at Christmas.
Subtle.
Or Apple's misunderstood ad from a while back. You think the kid is being antisocial, but then there's that touching reveal. It uses narrative structure for emotional impact.
Yeah, those definitely stick more than just specs. And P&G's thank you mom stuff always gets me.
Taps into that universal feeling, right?
Yeah.
Parental support. Google Search did something similar with their coming home and family connection, bridging distance. Even Disneyland Paris with that little duck story. It's all narrative reinforcing the brand's feeling.
It just shows how flexible storytelling is.
Yeah.
Different goals, different contexts. And Renew.org mentioned it's not just for corporations, right? Personal connection.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sharing our own experiences, our vulnerabilities, our joys, that build incredibly strong bonds. That Me Too feeling is powerful.
Yeah. And they also talked about education, how stories help us learn.
They did. Contrasting a dry lecture with teaching full of examples and stories. Apparently, stories create more neural pathways.
No.
Makes sense, right? You remember the teacher's anecdotes long after you forget the exact definition.
Definitely true for me. And for Renew.org, it seemed like storytelling was absolutely core to faith.
Yes, fundamental. The way spiritual truths are conveyed and understood. Jesus' parables are the prime example of relatable stories with deep meanings. They argue our brains are just wired for narrative.
It all comes back to that, doesn't it? This
Yeah.
deep human need to make sense of things through stories. Now, quickly, Deter mentions some tools for finding inspiration.
Right. They talked about media monitoring like Determ itself, Google Trends, social media analytics,
Mm-hmm.
things marketers use.
Right.
But the principle is broader. You can use tools like that just to see what people are talking about, what issues resonate, what emotions are surfacing. It's about tapping into the currents of conversation for potential story ideas, whatever your field,
Mhm.
understanding what catches people's interest.
Right. Keeping your finger on the pulse.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. If we boil down this whole deep dive, what are the main takeaways?
Well, I think the big one is that storytelling isn't just talking. It's an art. It's about crafting a narrative, intentionally using surprise, relevance, detail, emotion, all with a clear purpose and an eye on who you're talking to.
It's deliberate. And understanding that difference between the raw events, the story, and how you tell them the narrative that seems crucial too, it gives you control.
Exactly. It lets you shape how the information lands, how people experience it. It's powerful stuff.
It really is. So maybe here's something for you, the listener, to think about. Consider the stories you hear every day and the ones you tell.
Hmm.
How could you use some of these ideas, maybe just one or two, to make them more meaningful, more memorable, more impactful, whether that's at work or just chatting with friends? What stories have really stuck with you, and maybe now you have a better idea of why they did?